And we are now live. A warm welcome to our audience around the world, and thank you for joining us today for this global press conference. My name is Ingrid Vasiliu-Feltes, and it is an honor to moderate this event hosted by the WBAF Research Institute in order to share the results of our global survey, which aims to highlight the pandemic impact on women entrepreneurship. Our event will commence with welcome remarks from WBAF Executive Chairman, Mr. Baybars Altuntas. Afterwards, I will take the opportunity to share the survey results, and we will have the pleasure to hear special remarks from our four distinguished guests. First, we'll have Professor Inderjit Singh, President of WBAF Research Institute, then Swati Mandela, President of WBAF Global Women Leaders Committee, Ayumi Moore Aoki, President of Women in Tech, Marie-Christine Ogli, World President of World Association of Women Entrepreneurs, and we will conclude our event with Dr. Paul Duaney, Rector of WBAF Business School, who has generously agreed, like always, to deliver our closing remarks. And now, without further delay, please allow me to share the virtual floor with our WBAF Executive Chairman, Mr. Baybars Altuntas.
Yes, Ingrid, thank you very much for the intro. And I'm welcoming all journalists and participants from around the world. I have just received the note from Christina that we have around 40 journalists from around 30 countries today joining us. And I'm very pleased to announce that the technical team will make all these press conference and related documents available in 10 minutes after the conference ends, and it will be available online. So just a quick note to journalists joining us today. All documents you will see in this conference as PowerPoint and Word documents and PDFs will be available immediately after the conference. So thank you very much, dear Ingrid and dear Inderjit, for conducting this global survey. WBAF Research Institute, I think, is doing a great job. I'm very pleased to let you and all participants that G20 Global Partnership for Financial Inclusion GPFI committee, which is chaired by the Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, reported WBAF's last press conference and report in the activities report and policy recommendations to G20 leadership the week before. I think the key findings of this survey, impact of COVID on women entrepreneurship, will also take the attention of G20 community, and it will give important stimulus to G20 leaders to promote gender equality more. As you know, World Business Angels Investment Forum has three main missions: easing access to finance for entrepreneurs, increasing financial inclusion globally, and promoting gender equality. So we are giving a special importance to women entrepreneurship. So after our second global survey, I'm very pleased to see that Research Institute of the WBAF focused on women entrepreneurship and COVID's impact in this field. I, of course, reviewed the report, and last week I have presented the report to G20 committee, and this report will also be available in the documents. You will in the files you will find available after the press conference. I don't know if you are able to see, but this is the report that includes all aspects of key findings. This is what has been presented to the G20 under the Saudi Arabia presidency on 2nd of October. And this report includes also policy recommendations And I'm really thanking to Inderjit and Ingrid so much for their efforts to carry the women entrepreneurship and impact of pandemic issues on this field to the attention of G20. So I don't want to go one by one about the details of the report. I just want to make a general statement about this report, about the key findings rather than the report. There are many things we can discuss, as a matter of fact. There are expectations of women entrepreneurs from governments, from policymakers, from stakeholders of the economy, from the entrepreneurship ecosystem, from health ministries, from education ministries. But what I saw in the report, that women entrepreneurs are also mothers, and they are carrying their business and children at the same time, and their family. So this is an important detail, particularly for women entrepreneurs who have young children at home who are studying at the elementary school. Because if women entrepreneurs who are trying to finance their businesses and suffering from financing their businesses because of COVID issues, they have also another issue to think about, how they are going to handle with their small children at home who are trying to get education online. So this is one of the main issues of women entrepreneurs. I think Professor Singh is going to talk more about it. I just want to highlight the importance of digital inclusion as a result of this report. We again see that digital inclusion comes first. I think it will be very important to focus on digital inclusion rather than digital educational inclusion, digital health inclusion, digital financial inclusion, because if there is no digital inclusion, then it will not be very meaningful to talk about the others. Unfortunately, today, even in the United States, as we included in the report, 11 million students don't have access to internet and digital tools, including computers, laptops, etc. So how are we going to deliver online education to these children? There are 2 billion unbanked people in the world. How are we going to deliver online health services to these people who don't have even a bank account, who don't have even any statistics in the financial system? So I think it will be good to hear more from Ingrid and Professor Singh. And I'm thanking so much to Dr. Done, who chairs, just a second, something happened. I think, yes. Ingrid, you shared your screen, I think. Yes, that's fine. To Dr. Done for his leadership of the WBAF Business School. Dr. Done is not coming from the educational industry, as a matter of fact. He was the CEO of one of the biggest companies in Turkey, Turk Telecom, until December last year. Now he is transferring his know-how to the business school to young generations. And thanks so much, Dr. Done, for your efforts to make young generations more knowledgeable and more experienced. And I am thanking to all of you for joining us today for this press conference, and leaving the floor to Dr. Feltes.
Thank you for those wonderful remarks. I'm gonna maximize the screen real quick. The way we structured the survey will first highlight only some key findings, and then we'll have a second section where we provide a detailed report of all the questions we received from our respondents. This survey highlights opinions received between July 27th and September 18th. The survey was initiated by the Global Startup Committee and then conducted by the WBAF Research Institute. We received responses from 77 countries. And as you can see on the screen, there were a few countries that had the highest response rates, which also overlaps with the countries where most of our business headquarters were located. USA, Turkey, Mexico, South Africa, UK, and Zambia were at the highest respondent rate. The top 5 industries affected were finance and financial services, business support, education, telecommunications, food and beverage. This is different than the global survey we did several months ago. So I think it highlights what we just mentioned, that education has become a major concern across the world. When we try to understand if our respondents were planning to open a new business, majority said no. However, you can see that all the others were contemplating opening a new business between now and the next 12 months. Only 10% were not sure. When we try to understand the types of challenges that our respondents faced since the onset of the pandemic, it was evident that financial was at the top, close to 70%, and then followed very closely by demand, workforce, digital and technology challenges, and quite a robust, close to 20% felt that all the above were important. When we try to also understand if the pressures were so significant that some of our business owners would consider closing their business, majority showed quite high resiliency. 70% said no. However, a few, as you can see, just above 20% said that they were considering but not sure when. We also wanted to find out if our businesses were affected in a positive way. And most of respondents answered that no. However, you can see that just above 30% reported increased demand for their business. Some of them had increased revenue, and some highlighted less regulatory burdens that we experienced globally due to the pandemic. It was very interesting to see that just since the onset of the pandemic, almost close to 40% of our businesses had already changed their business model, and quite a robust 20% were in the process of changing their business model, which is what triggered our recent webinar that addressed pivoting and changing business models in the pandemic. It's a very hot topic. When we also try to understand if during our survey, if our respondents had applied for additional funding since the pandemic onset, majority, close to 60%, reported that they had not applied. Then the others applied but were either not successful or applied and were successful. That was the 20%. We also tried to understand how long they could last without additional funding. And about 30%, just a little bit above 30%, reported that they could last more than 12 months. However, all others reported they could only last either less than 3 months, 3 to 6 months, or 7 to 12 months, which is very concerning, of course. We also try to understand if digital transformation will be important in the post-pandemic economy. And I think you'll agree with me that just a little bit, 90% is a mind-blowing result. We usually don't get these type of numbers in a survey. This is the only time I've seen such a predominant response. So I think that reflects the highly digitalized, highly virtualized, and hyper-connected world we're living. They also, at a slightly above 80% response rate, mentioned they would be willing to invest in the digital transformation of their own business, and about 70%, just a little bit above, would also consider investing in a digital technology business, which is very impressive. We also try to understand if our respondents believed that digital fluency will be essential in the post-pandemic economy. And you can see this is another one that was close to 90% in our survey. The next slide highlights the social impact of the pandemic. And we try to understand if any of our respondents felt that the pandemic affected their personal standard of living. And you can see that it was a resounding yes, either significantly, moderately, or minimally. Now we will go over some other important findings in more detail. Here is a nice distribution of the continents where our business headquarters were located. As you can see, majority were Europe, then followed by Africa and Asia. It was an almost even split between business owners that had only one business or more than one. It was interesting to see that although about 80% clearly said they did not close a business since the onset of the pandemic, like we mentioned, some of them had, like about just a little bit above 10%, and a few were considering closing. Most of our respondents owned their business for more than 24 months, which corresponds with the funding that we saw on the previous slides. And all others had almost even distributions between 1 to 6, 7 to 12, and slightly below 24 months. When we looked at barriers to funding that our business owners experienced since the pandemic onset, it was evident that lack of access to funding was the predominant problem. Then lack of support in accessing funding, rejection of a request to funding, and insufficient funding amounts followed close after. We also tried to understand if additional funding would be available, how would they allocate it? And business development was close to 50% as one of the major concerns and where funding should be diverted. Then marketing, business infrastructure, staff compensation and salaries, and all the above followed closely after. We also tried to understand if there were some businesses that experienced increase in funding, and just a little bit above 10% have experienced that. However, of course, about 80% did not have that luxury. When we also tried to address what support would be required either now or after the pandemic, we had quite an even distribution amongst digital fluency support, alternate funding sources, courses, and coaching. But the top three were definitely funding, business development, and marketing, as reflected in the previous slides. We also tried to understand some of the social impact, and a few of the slides that follow will address precisely that. So one of the questions tried to understand which factors had created the most difficulties for women entrepreneurship. And financial inclusion was almost close to 60%, as referenced in our welcome remarks. Health, education, digital fluency, just overall social quality of life were the other ones that had quite strong response rates. We also tried to explore if the mindset of our women business entrepreneurs had changed from before and since the onset of the pandemic. And it was interesting to see that it was quite consistent. If prior to the pandemic, someone considered themselves as a traditional mindset, it stayed in about 20% of the respondents the same. About 40% or a little bit more were millennial before and considered themselves millennial after. And then there was a switch for about 30% from traditional to millennial during this pandemic. So this was a very interesting finding. The next slides try to address the response rate to the pandemic. And when our respondents rated their government's response to the pandemic, you can see there was quite an even distribution between good, poor, and very poor. So this was a very relevant finding as well. Then we also tried to understand the recovery plan and opinions about post-pandemic government response regarding the strategy for those. And as you can see, again, quite a lot of distribution between dissatisfied, neither satisfied or dissatisfied, a whole spectrum of responses, but it's a very tiny percent that was very satisfied. As mentioned in our welcome remarks, childcare has been one of the main challenges for everybody worldwide, but for women entrepreneurs, you can see a little bit above 40% experience this problem. We also tried to understand how important health and education were. And from a priority perspective, as you can see, close to 60% felt they could not choose, and both were equally important, whereas a little bit above 30% prioritized health. One of the major elements, as we saw in previous slides, was access and digital fluency and digital transformation concerns. So internet access or speed was one of our questions. And you can see just a little bit over 50% did not have a problem with that, but almost 48% felt they had big issues with access or speed. And when we then further tried to elicit which domain has been the most challenging due to these problems with internet access, business operations were clearly the most affected, then education and health. We also tried to understand the preference for returning to school plans for children in the family or in their community, just a general understanding. And almost close to 40% preferred that children would not return to school before March 2021. Some preferred an immediate, and then some had no opinion. We also tried to better understand if they had any support during this pandemic. And you can see there was mostly support from family or spouse. And then about 30% of women entrepreneurs reported absolutely no support. Regarding childcare responsibilities, as you can see, a little bit over 40% had to, like was mentioned already, take care of their children and of their business needs during this pandemic. Additionally, some of our respondents were able to share that in addition to the children and their business responsibilities, they also had to provide support to immediate family or other members in their community or to their spouse or staff. So as you can see, a complex burden on women entrepreneurs during this time period. We also tried to understand if they had to, in addition to just child care, had to provide support with the child's education during this period. And as you can see, just about 20% felt that was an additional task. And then we have a few more and then we're almost ready. When we tried to understand which domain was the most challenging to manage during the pandemic, as you can see, financial again tops the chart, social right after, then health and education, and the robust, just slightly above 20% felt that all of these were important and challenging. I know we're going to take questions at the end. What I would like to do now is to welcome our first guest, Professor Inderjit Singh, and he will share some of his reflections on the survey, as well as a complex analysis and a comparative analysis with other findings. I can share the screen for you. Dr. Singh, the floor is yours if you unmute.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay. I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this press conference. You know, since the COVID-19 crisis began, the World Business Angel Forum has conducted 2 surveys. We did one in May, was a general startup community, and then we did one follow-on on women entrepreneurs to understand the issues that the startup communities around the world face. And so today we have shared the second result, which Ingrid just shared. Looking at the results, and we compare this against some of the other global organizations that have been doing similar surveys, our findings are quite in line and quite similar to what the other major organizations like IMF, G20, and other organizations have conducted. So it's quite in line, and so we do realize, therefore, this is a major problem. And of course, we realize that the problems that the women entrepreneurs face are also consistent with what the other entrepreneurs, all entrepreneurs face. If we compare to the survey that we did in May this year, which, for example, funding will run out in 3 to 6 months. Business transformation and other issues that they face are quite similar. So that is in line with what we saw before. But of course, as the survey here has shown, that women entrepreneurs face far greater challenges compared to their male counterparts. It's sad, but that's a reality. And they are the women entrepreneurs, unfortunately, are paying a greater price as a result of the disruption caused by COVID-19. And so, for example, 60% of the jobs that were lost during this period were women who lost their jobs. And there are greater issues faced by women, in terms of digital technology adoption, impact on their operation, and access to financings. These were something that the women entrepreneurs saw as bigger issues compared to their male counterparts. And of course, the other thing which is also quite worrying was the fact that the women also face greater discriminatory issues. And so, for example, as Ingrid mentioned, they will face issues on having to leave jobs to handle childcare issues. They had the higher burden of care responsibilities for their families. Also, quite sadly, rising domestic and workplace violence is something that we saw as a result of the COVID, the crisis. Now everyone is stressed, but the women are facing a rising number of such violence, both at the workplace and at home. And digital inclusion, which again our chairman mentioned earlier, is something that has been a challenge for women, finding it very difficult to adapt the highly fast changing and highly digitalized environment that we are facing today. So, with all of these findings that we have come about, we intend to see how we can assist and help our community to come out stronger, to be able to handle some of these difficult issues that we are facing. As we have done as a follow-up of the first survey, we have organized master classes, webinars, and so on to bring experts in to guide some of our entrepreneurs. We hope that after this, this has given us some direction of what we can do to help alleviate the problem that women entrepreneurs are facing. I want to thank Ingrid for spending a considerable amount of time in doing and summarizing this survey. Thank you, and thank you to everyone else who have put this press conference together. Thank you.
Thank you for your insightful comments. We appreciate your guidance and mentorship and leadership. And now it's my special honor to introduce our guests. I can speak on behalf of many women worldwide that they're inspirational and motivational and serve as great role models for all of us. First, I would love to pass the virtual floor to Swati Mandela, who is the president of our Global Women's Leader Committee at WBAF. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ingrid, and I'd like to greet everyone from different parts of the world. I don't think that this conference has come at a more important time. I mean, for me personally, this pandemic has impacted my personal life in so many ways. So much loss that I've endured sort of around me and in my family. And that has had so many other rippling effects as it relates to my livelihood, my business, and just being able to kind of mentally keep things together, because I think that's a big part of it as well. Is in the midst of trying to cope with it all, you have to have a mental sort of, health sound. And so that's certainly been a challenge that I've seen in my own personal life and for many women, within my networks. So I think, it's now more time than ever for us to support each other. With all the difficulties, I think there's massive opportunity for us to relook at the way business is done. But I think the main thing is how we show up for each other and how WBAF can be more of a supportive way in which women feel like they can be encouraged. And so I'm not going to be long about it. I look forward to listening to the panelists who are going to be speaking on this topic. And I think that more than anything now is the time for us to really kind of look positively towards the future, even in the midst of so much turmoil and so much darkness. So I'm encouraged that there's a network and a community such as WBAF. Thank you to Baybars for being so consistent and persistent in your pursuit to support entrepreneurs across the world, women entrepreneurs in particular. And I think now more than ever, we need the men to really step up and support women more than ever, but for women to also support each other. And with that being said, thank you to everyone, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you so much for sharing some of your personal experiences and empathizing with women entrepreneurs worldwide as eloquently as you described. And now I would like to pass the virtual floor to Marie-Christine.
Hello, I'm Karine de Meijer. I'm actually...
Okay, you're representing, that's okay. Well,
Yes.
Please welcome.
Okay, hi, yes, I'm actually representing the Women in Tech Global Movement.
Sure, no problem.
Baybars, I want to thank you because I've been a part actually representing the Netherlands since last year. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, I had to miss the conference in February, and I very much look forward to this year's. So I'm hoping a miracle will actually come our way. And I want to thank you because these webinars have really been a lifeline for me during my lockdown, because I was living in New York, and as we all know, the situation was becoming really, really bad there. And I had to go to Costa Rica. And that's where I realized that connectivity, that's something in the West that we actually take for granted. And there I actually realized that it was not something which everybody has as a natural way to be able to communicate. And so when the whole COVID-19 hit the world, I saw a lot of female businesses, especially in Costa Rica, really having a hard time because the women had not been digitally educated. And so we have actually been able, with the women in technology, to actually grow our movement over this pandemic. We actually had 12,000 followers beginning of February, and now we actually have 32,000. So in 7 months' time, and we now have chapters in almost 17 countries. We have over 50,000 people who actually attended our conference at the end of May. And it just showed that there's an enormous need for women to actually come together. And I loved what actually Swati said, is that women need to support each other and we need to come together. There is no reason to be each other's competitor. And I think that's really what we want to focus on for the next year, that we really want to help with the education. We want to do many, many outreach programs. We have the dream, and our mission is to actually have 5 million women and girls empowered through technology by 2030. We have actually aligned our whole movement together with the SDGs. We are actually working together with UN Women in many of the countries. And I think also having, being both a member of the WBAF and also of the WBAF Women's Group, I think that's really going to help us grow our movement globally. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Karine de Meijer. We appreciate you filling in for Ayumi Moraoki. Thank you. And now it is my great pleasure to pass the virtual floor to Dr. Paul Doheny for his closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. This subject of financial inclusion, which was the starting point of this analysis, and then including that, the effect in particular on women, and in fact on entrepreneurs in particular, who in any case are under any normal circumstance facing enormous challenge and difficulty. And on top of this, the coronavirus impact that, as we can see from your numbers and your analysis, has been quite devastating on a very large number of people, let us say at least 70%, and let us not look at the ones that the minority that have in fact benefited from this. And in particular, when we look at the private needs of entrepreneurs, as the chairman indicated, in relation to their private lives, especially when they have children in this particular period. On the subject of digital inclusion, or what we were calling in our sector, basically the digital divide. Now, this subject of digital divide has been around, let us say, approximately for around 2 decades. But if we put the definition of digital, let us focus in the last 10 years that in fact, the good and the bad part of it is that mobile technologies are now able to deliver cost effectively access of reasonable bandwidth and reasonable capacity. That should mean in reality that there should not be any digital divide at a certain level of connectivity. Now, of course, I'm not talking about rural communities because obviously the rurals are going to be more difficult and that requires special solutions like universal services. They need to be connected, and I think that is going to be bridged clearly in the next 2 to 3 years, maximum 5 years, with much better satellite technology that my generation were not capable of providing. The satellite technologies of my time did not succeed to deliver any meaningful bandwidth, in fact, let alone cost. So in summary, the technology is available. It is actually cost effective, and there is sufficient competition in the provision of that service. And where there is no competition, obviously, the meaning like universal service, like rural areas, that those technologies, I believe, in the next few years, we can see, there are at least 2-3 serious candidates in that direction that can provide meaningful bandwidth practically at any point on Earth. So what we have aspired, perhaps in our generation, to believe that by now we would have, I believe that in the next 5 years, we're not that far away from it, that this will be nailed completely. And hence, younger people who are entering into the workforce, or are even more interesting and important, are the entrepreneurs who are trying to build up their businesses in these difficult times, is in fact a unique opportunity for them to try to survive if they can, to survive it, because if you survive it, then there's a chance of going on. And if you can't survive it, as we all know with startups, you're going to need to start again. You're going to need to try it again. And you're probably going to be able to try the same idea or a better idea very, very soon. And obviously, people need to work together. I mean, women obviously should cooperate as much as they possibly can. And then a platform like this, where men can help women, that they get, like an equal chance. And I think this is what excites me about these platforms. I always indicate to the chairman, that I'm basically an execution type person, and I don't really like, just to talk about things that we can't get them done. This platform should provide a means of support that is actual by men to women in any means that we possibly can. Because it is global and of reach, we can be a good reference for you where we know you, and obviously we support you as much as we can to actually get a result. This is the meaning why these types of platforms are important. And given that they have access to the G20, that they can vocalize it, the role of government has to involve a certain level of support for working mothers, frankly, especially if they are entrepreneurs. I mean, that should be clear. In addition, some level of positive discrimination that encourages, and in some cases obliges, either companies or some level of budget that the governments have, that provides some level of positive discrimination in favor, maybe not of women entrepreneur directly, because that may be difficult to administer and can be abused, but in a way that encourages by like tax advantages when the mix of men to women is healthy. And that's at that point I'd like to stop. But I see the future as positive, and that this coronavirus period, if anything, is pushing us in what we have always needed to do. And I stop at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very insightful comments. We have a few questions in the chat. So before we conclude, I wanted to give you the opportunity to respond. Some of them try to understand if we're planning further surveys to go more in depth. So Professor Singh, would you like to answer that one? If we're planning future surveys, maybe over the next few months, specifically to better understand social aspects and health aspects and job impact. Go ahead.
Yes, we will continue to do surveys as we see new issues that come about to understand the issues. The surveys are very useful. We were already planning to do one general survey at the end of this year as a follow-up to the one that we did in May to look at how the problems have progressed or whether things have improved. And so at the same time, if let's say our community, there are areas that you think that is worth for us to look at through a survey, please share with us. We will discuss internally with the leadership team, and for sure, we will do what we can, because we do have quite a good reach to our community around the world. It's quite a wide community, and I think wherever we can help, we will definitely step in and do the necessary service.
Thank you. And then Paul, there's one for you. Can you comment on the impact of women entrepreneurs on country GDPs, if you have any insights on that and how that has been affected in the pandemic?
It's difficult to link, frankly, GDP to this number, but we know that, for example, very rich countries, for example, aren't actually doing all that well either. I think what worries me the most, to tell you frankly, rather than GDP itself, is the health of the economy of that country. And if you measure that by their public debt to GDP, I think that is the affordability of the government to take action. So if you measure how much in debt is the government that you are, of the country that you're living in, you know how much to ask for. And we all have to know that these are not easy times to be asking for things. We also, by the way, should be thinking of one more thing, is that some of these are not just giveaways. These can be like a form of loan support. You have to pay the money back. Nobody's asking for free money. But when you're asking for money from your government, remember to measure the debt level they're at, and then you can benchmark correctly to other countries, not the GDP itself.
Thank you. And then for Catherine, we have one for you. You mentioned all the efforts about engaging women and educating and coaching. And the question is, what are we doing for translating that into new jobs, particularly with the digital transformation and digital fluency concerns we've seen? Can you maybe comment on some of your opinions on that?
Well, what we've actually seen is that a lot of women, who, especially when they're technically educated, that they actually get the courage and the confidence to start for themselves, to actually become an entrepreneur. And I think in that sense that the pandemic, people actually, there are no more excuses not to do something. I'm always, trying to look from the positive side. And I remember when I was filling out the survey, I really felt that I was actually ticking up the box towards the positive side. Fortunately, I've also been healthy. Yeah, I realized that I've been very fortunate with that as well, because of course people have also had, health issues. But I think that the technology education right now, there is so much online education. If you look at all the universities around the world, literally, I remember listening to a interview with Yuval Noah Harari, who said that he had been trying to advise the Israeli government, to do actually online education for years. And then he said, nobody ever wanted it. And then suddenly within like 2 weeks, everything was actually available. So I think people should also use this time to re-educate themselves and to maybe start a course that you actually may be using for like a new business. There really are no more excuses. you are much more at home and much more behind your computer. And so, this is a huge opportunity.
Thank you. And then Chairman Altuntas, one for you regarding financial inclusion efforts on a global scale. You mentioned digital identity and financial inclusion and the importance of that. Can you maybe comment on what specific action items can entrepreneurs expect?
Digital, I think pandemic business environment create some opportunities for all entrepreneurs, not only for women entrepreneurs, but all entrepreneurs. Because now anything digital is under the scope of angel investors, VC funds, private equity funds, wealth management institutions, family offices. Traditional business owners are trying to discover opportunities of startup economy. And startup economy is very relevant to digital economy, because most business ideas come from young generations and they are generally digital based. So Dr. Done, for example, brought the importance of digital transformation to WBAF board's attention, and we all agreed with him, because digital transformation from the smallest company to the biggest company now is not an option, it is a must. So any woman entrepreneur who will take a role in easing the digital transformation of any company, I think will be able to create good business opportunities. So such kind of entrepreneurial approach from man or woman, nobody will care if the good business opportunity is coming from a man or woman. Everybody focuses on the business opportunity. So I am sure women entrepreneurs, if they can overcome the other challenge, I am very aware of the fact that women entrepreneurs and men, when you put them, it is not 1-1, unfortunately, it is 2-1. This is the case. So I think I completely agree with Dr. Donay. Governments cannot do it. I don't believe. I mean, governments cannot do it. But women can do it by using such kind of platforms. WBAF is one of them. Such kind of platforms to advocate these how they can make 2-1, bring it to 2-2. So unfortunately, of course, there are 187 countries in the world. We have representatives in 115 of them. So we know almost what is happening all over the world. Dr. Donay said something important, I'm sure you all catched. Women entrepreneurship is not only a problem of developing or undeveloped countries. Women's inclusion in economy is still a problem even in the most developed economies. So this is a global issue, and I think digital inclusion, because digital inclusion is now in the agenda of all economies, of all governments, all stakeholders, of all policymakers, then I think it will be a meaningful invitation to all women entrepreneurs to consider what they can do in digital economy and create new business ideas and boost their economies through innovations coming from digital issues. Thank you, Ingrid.
Thank you.
Ingrid,
Thank
can I
you.
just add something on what
Please.
Chairman has said? You know what? Let us like say it exactly as it is, the reality. Digital, not transformation. Transformation is actually quite technical, and it involves professionals who are very good on technology. So that part has to be done. But frankly, that's back office stuff, and it's there are many people who can do it. So you can always get it done on a cost-effective way. You can define what you want, get it done at the lowest possible cost. But I think that in a so-called digital future, women, in fact, have more opportunity than men. And this has been recognized, in fact, in the last decade. But now, as it's being sped up, women that can handle by their nature better in general than men, multitasking, for example, multi-screen and so on, which men we know cannot do. So when, for example, we are training complex things on screens, we are always in the companies putting men where they're strong by virtue. I'm talking in general, of course. We test the people, we don't discriminate. But I have never witnessed in all the venture capital investments that I personally made and all the investments that we have ever made of startups and early stage, any instance, a single instance of discrimination against a woman entrepreneur when we had limited money and looking at a number of alternatives. You see, I have never witnessed it. And if anything, now in the digital world, I think that women even have more opportunity. So despite the catastrophe of this coronavirus that has hit everybody at the same time, which is also good, it's a wake-up call for all of us, okay? This has pushed, and luckily there is technology available today installed that is meaningful, bandwidth and capacity. That's where I come from. And frankly, I don't see any limitation, and it's affordable. Remember, you don't need to force it on people. For that is the reason. For example, 15 years ago, I was working as an example in Saudi Arabia, okay, on a project. I wasn't physically there, but our company was active there. I was busy other parts of the world in the telecom sector. We were discussing about a special virtual type of service in telecommunications with some special features. We were discussing with the Saudis, as you know, they have segregation. The women cannot work in the same place as men, which basically means they cannot work full stop. What was the project that we asked? Let us develop an MVNO for woman by woman, women to serve women. I worked on that project for some time out of passion, and I failed. Okay? But I tried, okay? And I did it for a business reason. I wasn't doing it to help women, though I'd love to help any person that needs help. But that is a market opportunity, you see? And okay, I failed. We did the same with education here. Around 15 years ago, we put online education. We failed. Now it's pushing. Online health. I had 3 stages in my life that I entered. The last one was a venture capital company. We invested in it through the company itself. And again, we failed because, you know, I mean, we bought it, but we were stopped by the Ministry of Health, okay? And now, just 1 year later, boom, now it's doing. I don't mean that company is going to be a great company, but at least, you see, so all of my efforts that I have been frustrated in my entire career, I hate to say it, but this damn Corona, okay, is a wake-up call to everybody that now is it, you see, and luckily technology is here. And I mentioned the rural areas as well. So I see the future after this tough wake-up call for everybody is actually better than before. I don't want to say something positive because we're living a hard time. Thank you.
Well, what better way to close our session on that positive note? I would like to thank all our guests, our audience, all representatives of the media. There was one more question that wanted to make sure that we're posting all of these, and I think Chairman Baybars mentioned at the beginning, but if you missed it, this will be made available on our website and in the media kit. Thank you so much for attending. This concludes our event for today. Thank you.
Ingrid, just a second, please. I received a last minute notice, and then let's say goodbye to everybody. Some journalists sent a message to Christina that if they can reach to what G20 countries did in these pandemic times in their countries for women entrepreneurship. I want to share a document with you. This is a very recent report of G20 country measures and experiences in the impact of COVID-19, which has been, delivered to member countries a few days ago. And this because Saudi Arabia put digital financial inclusion of women in economies as an agenda item this year. Then they included also what these countries, G20 countries and international organizations did in the last 6 months for women entrepreneurship too. I think it will be a good report to review. As you see in the international organizations, there are 9 organizations they refer to, and OECD, the Islamic Development Bank, World Bank Group, and WBAF. So you can see a summary of all what happened in these organizations, and also the countries one by one. So I think it will be good to put this report to the document. So I have just sent a message to Christina, and this report will also be available after this meeting online. And just a quick note, maybe it will be something interesting to know and as an item to think about next year. This year, Saudi Arabia was the term president of G20, and they carried digital financial inclusion of young entrepreneurs and digital financial inclusion of women entrepreneurs as the main topic. But next year, Italy will be the term president. And last week, the Italian G20 presidency announced what they will focus on in 2021. So the Italian presidency will focus on people, planet, and prosperity. So these three keywords will be the main point of G20 countries next year. I just wanted to share this. And thank you very much again, Ingrid, for your moderation, and dear Professor Singh. By the way, can I, for example, ask to Professor Singh a quick question? Maybe it will be good to hear a feedback from him while closing the session. Professor Singh, you were one of the founders of the first unicorns of the world around 20-25 years ago. And you were a parliament member in Singapore for 20 years and responsible for innovation. You have a bestseller book on innovation, etc., etc. What do you think? I mean, why unicorns in the world doesn't have so many women founders? Can you unmute?
Yeah, you know, if you look at the unicorns of the past that emerged during the time when I started in 1998, the company that became a unicorn. You know, these were very deep tech related and technology based companies, and there were very few women, you know, who were involved in engineering and in deep tech at that point of time. They were good scientists, but you know, in the field of industry and engineering, there were very few. But this has changed quite rapidly in the last decade or so. I'm seeing many women entrepreneurs who are capable of creating the unicorns of the future, and because of the changes that have happened over time, we are seeing the momentum, and I think in a few years' time we will see many more successful women entrepreneurs, because today, you know, women have equal access, are equally interested, are equally participating in this area of technology and area of science, and they are also getting the right support, whether it's financing or whether it's you know, other form of regulatory support to actually create companies. And I'm quite confident that we will see the gap between men and women entrepreneurs who create unicorn close in the next few years. So it's coming soon.
Thank you. Any other comments or? Okay,
No.
Great. Thank you everybody for your time. We appreciate everyone's attendance and participation, and we welcome your further questions anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.